All right, ladies and gentlemen, friends and foes, welcome to the Brown Perspective. We had an interesting incident this week between Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Congressman Yoho. Why don't you
Yoho,
tell us what happened for those who may not be aware of how it went down?
Yoho Uno.
Yoho. No.
Well, he had to regulate her, man. What else are you going to do when a woman is becoming too powerful and she starts to become the leader or the figure that represents the new Democratic Party and she has presidency all written all over her in the next 8 to 12 years? What do you do when somebody threatens you like that? Huh? What's the natural reaction, man? There's no other reaction. You got to put her in her place.
Anger. Anger. Look at you, man, representing the patriarchy very well.
I don't understand how this Representative Ted Yoho can even justify this. I want to skip it beyond patriarchal and sexist. I just want to jump straight to stupid because this makes absolutely no sense. So um, he accosts her and calls her disgusting. He called her disgusting for linking New York crime spike to poverty and unemployment and telling her you are out of your freaking mind. And I mean that alone might be okay with that, but then as he's walking away, he calls her a fucking bitch. And I know this is on video. I saw the video, but I didn't catch the part where he says this. So I don't know if it's definitive that he's saying it or if there's some wiggle room there that he's trying to exploit because he's pretending like he said something else. So the
Hmm.
audio quality must not be 100% clear, or maybe he's just stupid enough to think that people can't hear what he's saying. But I think for most people that see the video, I think most people conclude that this is what he said. And and again, calling her that for what she's saying, she's linking New York City crime, the crime spike in New York City, to poverty and unemployment, which is she's drawing a conclusion from some set of data that she's analyzed, right? Or maybe also
Hmm.
from personal experience and incorporating it. If you want to have an issue with that, then just prove your point, show her some facts, make a compelling case as to why that's not true. But this guy just goes after her on a personal level,
Hmm.
and then go ahead.
Yeah, no, so I think I mean, it sounds like part of it, and I'm not trying to justify it. So it sounded like part of it, I guess he was upset that she was saying, equating poverty with being a criminal.
Yeah.
And I think as somebody who's poor, yeah, I think that, or who grew up poor, I know that, you can be poor and not be a criminal. But I think perhaps the point that AOC was trying to make is because of the incredible financial struggle, because of the disproportionate impact of coronavirus and the pandemic on communities of color, the fact that they're getting impacted at least 3 times, infected at least 3 times the rate as whites, and they're dying at least 2 times as much as whites. And so again, it's all the result of these inequalities. So they're losing their jobs, and if not, they're being forced to work, which is where they get exposed and then bring it to their families. So I think that her point was saying that, we need to act, particularly this week, as Congress was debating additional stimulus. And, Republicans are thinking that, what, we need to reduce the unemployment benefit because people have an incentive not to go back to work. And obviously, some families have just, that's the only thing that has enabled many families to pay rent and stay home and sort of have some retain a little bit of their normal life. So I know that those are some of the things they're playing out here. But yeah, but the fact that you have and I think he's probably more senior than him, right? Both in age, both in rank, that
Oh
he
yeah.
would feel so moved to accost her and confront her in public is just doesn't make sense. I mean, there must be some others. Somebody must have been talking her up or something because like you just don't. snap and tell people, hey, what you said is fucked up. Shut up. I
Well,
hate you.
especially because everything you said is this is the Republican talking point, which they have been repeating for decades now. That certain groups of people are predisposed to violence, and they don't ever think about how specific policies in specific neighborhoods, especially if these are inner city neighborhoods, their schools underfunded, you don't have a lot of economic opportunity for the individuals there, and then you have laws like in New York, the stop and frisk law, that disproportionately would put young black people and Latinos into prison and then give them a criminal record, and so they get out of prison and then they have a hard time finding a job, and then that it's like a downward spiral, and they seem to either be willfully ignorant or completely stupid to see that there might be a connection between that and crime.
Hmm.
Right? And that's all she was saying. And this guy is just repeating what the Republicans have always said on Fox News, on any other conservative medium. But this time, this guy decided to make it personal. And as you were talking, I was thinking, well, why would he take it to that level? I'm thinking now, did he try to flirt with her at some point? Did he try to be
Maybe.
friendly with her, try to have something with her on a personal level, and she just turned him down? And now he's out to get her. It's a personal matter between him. Because, again, this isn't new. Like, what she said, what part of her argument that poverty and unemployment may be linked to poverty, what part of that is new to this guy? And he looks like he's in his 50s, 60s. I mean, this is his bread and butter that he's been talking about, Republicans talk about for the last few decades. But yeah, this isn't. So yeah, this is unexplainable, and also this is where the whole male white privilege comes into play. That he can talk to her like that. Like he wouldn't talk to a guy like that. He wouldn't talk
No.
to a male congressman or senator or any other politician. At all. Like men don't talk to each other like that. Well, most of the time, there's usually the actual risk of getting your butt kicked if you
That's true.
if you
No,
talk
but
to another man like that. So this is total sexism, that he thinks that he can just talk to her in this derogatory, condescending manner. Not only she's a woman, she's a Latina, and if he in his mind thinks that this woman is inferior, then yeah, that's how he justifies talking to her like that. And he probably got a lot of support also from a lot of people that agree with him on this.
yeah, and it's
His
interesting
base.
because I think you're onto something. Because I know there's nothing that makes a man angrier or more insecure than being rejected.
Yeah.
So there's that point. But then the other crazy thing is like, and I know what's his name, Klepper used to be in the Daily Show, but he still does these segments where he used to go to like the Trump rallies and he used to try to confront folks about the hypocrisy
Hmm.
of like, oh, we just treat women differently here in the US, but then the guy is wearing like, lock her up or Trump
Hmm.
that bitch. So there's this also the irony of oh, and there was a woman who commented like, oh yeah, I don't want to have a woman president because she would start a war.
Hmm.
She would start a war right away over an emotional, like her hormones are too much. And then he was like, well, haven't all wars been started by men?
Yeah.
So she didn't have a response to that. But in this case,
And
when
because
there's
of
a
emotions.
sexism of people of women being emotional and erotic and things like that, it was older white man who kind of lost it and snapped.
Yeah, it's turning out that the snowflakes, which is the derogatory term that has been adopted in the last few years for these liberals, it turns out that you see that more and more common with these conservatives, that they're melting at just the utterance of some of these progressive policies or some of these like forward thinking observations that, by the way, not new, right? But just saying them these days triggers them. It triggers these conservatives. And so of course there was backlash, and then like anybody else without a spine, he backpedals, and now he's trying to apologize. I apologize for the abrupt manner of the conversation I had with my colleague from New York. It is true that we disagree on policies and visions for America, but that does not mean we should be disrespectful. Yeah, that's exactly what you were. Like all these people, like
Exactly.
there's people that repeatedly make these offenses, and then they just think that they can apologize and just and then wipe the slate clean.
And
So
it was like the most non-apology apology
yeah,
ever. And he
yeah,
did it first, and I think he tried to get ahead of it by apologizing first. But obviously, I think the way that AOC came back at him, that's been the sort of the highlight of this incidents.
yeah. Let me read this line also because this is what a lot of men without ideas always they try to hide under this or try to hide behind this. The whole idea that well, I'm married and I have daughters, so why would I talk to a woman like that if I have my own daughter? Like making it like if that matters, right? So he says, having been married for 45 years with two daughters, I'm very cognizant of my language. Apparently, you're not. Or maybe you are cognizant of your language around your own daughters, but you've compartmentalized. You treat your daughters different in a different way that you treat someone like AOC, who
Yeah.
happens to be a female and Latina also. The offensive name calling words attributed to me by the press were never spoken to my colleague. And it's just flat out denial, right? And if they were construed that way, I apologize for their misunderstanding. So it's just trying to hide behind this vague language if they were construed that way, making it seem like, well, I didn't say those things, but if people out there are interpreting it that way, then it's just a misunderstanding. And you can't even,
Mhm.
like, if you're going to say these things, then at least have the courage to stand behind them and say, yeah, I said those things. Now, that's how I feel about her. And he's a
Mhm.
fucking bitch for thinking that there's a link between poverty and crime. He can't even do that because he has no backbone, and none of these guys do. And so, let's go to let's not read the rest of his apology because it's a bunch of BS. But let's go to AOC's response. It's a bit long, so we're just gonna play maybe up to the minute mark just to
Well,
catch.
this is the highlights. This
Yeah,
is from Trevor Noah, some of the highlights. I think the whole video is like 10 minutes or 9 minutes, but definitely encourage you all to see it if you haven't.
yep.
I was minding my own business, walking up the steps, and Representative Yoho put his finger in my face. He called me disgusting. He called me crazy. And in front of reporters, Representative Yoho called me, and I quote, a fucking bitch. And I want to be clear that Representative Yoho's comments were not deeply hurtful or piercing to me because I have worked a working class job. I have waited tables in restaurants. I have ridden the subway. I have tossed men out of bars that have used language like Mr. Yoho's. Mr. Yoho mentioned that he has a wife and two daughters. I am someone's daughter too. And I am here because I have to show my parents that I am their daughter and that they did not raise me to accept abuse from men.
And I don't care what anybody says. I am.
Sorry, Noah, no time for you today. Yeah, that's the gist of it. And that's the other thing that we didn't talk about. The media was right there. He knew that he was being filmed.
Yeah,
This
it's
is
just
this is do you think this is part of the Trump effect that he gave people like him a free pass into just thinking that they can go out there and say whatever it is that they're thinking?
I think so. And actually, AOC in her remarks, she does talk about how the president has talked bad about her and other women. So I think she does put that in context. And then when you think about it, it's also it was you know and 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 for the folks who don't know like politics, particularly in the Senate or the House, it's all about decorum. It's all about trying to maintain this illusion of it's a place where you do business in a respectful, non-emotional way. So when you lose decorum, that's seen as a big no-no. So that's why you oftentimes when you see politicians giving speeches in the House or Senate floor, you say, "Oh, my dear friend from so and so from California," even if you don't agree with them, you never disrespect them. You just address the arguments you're supposed to. And in some ways, it used to be that even if you disagreed with somebody politically, you can still be um, good good friends outside of that, and get together and have dinners and all that stuff. So I think there's that loss of decorum. But I remember when President Barack Obama was giving his speech, and there was that, I think it might have been a Florida, if not Florida, Texas Republican who also screamed, "You lie," and that was seen as like an amazing breakdown in decorum. So now you have this congressman doing it. To your point, even though she's an equal, right? Because she's also an elected representative. I think somebody that he probably thought that, you know what, I can have this conversation with her and treat her that way, and there's not going to be repercussions. Unfortunately, that is not the case.
Yeah, it's total snowflake.
Unfortunately, I guess we can say.
Yeah, this guy's a total snowflake. If that's what riled him up, and then this is his last statement here, or part of the last paragraph of his apology. As my colleagues know, I am passionate about those affected by poverty. My wife Carolyn and I started out together at the age of 19 with nothing. Like, really? Nothing? So he got married? No. Nothing to his name? Not even an education? Because, I mean, that counts. You have an education, that's worth something. That's not nothing. That's value, that's worth. So I would be interested to understand what this nothing means, because a lot of people do this. They want to pretend like they started with nothing. Oh, like Trump. Oh, I started with nothing, just a small $1 million loan from my dad.
Yeah.
We did odd jobs and we were on food stamps. Okay, so being on food stamps again, what were the circumstances? Was he on food stamps for 10 years? 15 years? Was he on food stamps for a month? Was he on food stamps for 2 months? Right. Again, what's the context here?
And sure. Why do you associate yourself with the party now that's trying to cut those benefits?
Right. And I know the face of poverty, and for a time it was mine. That is why I know people in this country can still, with all its faults, rise up and succeed and not be encouraged to break the law. I mean, a lot of these Republicans, they hide behind statements like this. And for people that don't really know how to interpret these statements, it sounds like it's correct. It sounds like it's the right thing. And that's why a lot of people agree with them. Because they say, oh, well, yeah, I came from poverty and I didn't resort to violence. But there's so much that's hidden in these 2 sentences here. Because
my grandparents came here the legal way.
Right. But see, for example, he says, I know the face of poverty, and for a time it was mine. Okay, fine. For a time. Well, how long was that? Right? Because he's obviously trying to compare himself to these people that are breaking the law and saying, well, look, I could have easily been one of those people, but I didn't. Therefore, these other people don't have an excuse. Well, that's BS, right? Because we don't know how long he was in poverty for. That is why I know people in this country can still, with all its faults, rise up and succeed and not be encouraged to break the law. No, it doesn't make, you can't compare it. These comparisons are asinine. Like, for anyone that tries to make that comparison that I did something, therefore others, like completely different situations, because this guy could have been in poverty and struggling for 6 months. Could have been in food stamps for 3 months or something. He's trying to compare himself to people that have grown up into poverty, generational poverty. Mm-hmm. And again, maybe you're someone that's trying to do everything right, even though you're trying to struggle out of poverty and not turn to crime. But then your neighborhoods are riddled with drugs. The schools are not effective in graduating kids and sending them to college. And again, they throw you into prison, and that tarnishes your record so you can't get a decent job. And because you're a human, eventually you will find a partner, and chances are you're going to have kids. So anyway, it's not about the fact that somebody can be poor and then rise out of that poverty without turning to crime. It's about the circumstances under which you live in poverty and for how long. Because if you're going to live in poverty for decades, it's just, I mean, the data will show this if we look at the studies. It's more likely that people will turn to crime in the face of desperation. Because nobody is thinking, I have this amazing opportunity in front of me and I'm just going to go work and make some money and I'm going to have a pretty stable upbringing. I'm not going to go with that. I think I'm just going to go sell drugs instead. Right? Like, people don't make the decision that way. If they had a better opportunity, they would not turn to crime. And a lot of the times, sometimes they don't even have a choice, because if you grow up in projects, let's say you grow up in the projects, you grow up around crime. You get incorporated into it. and you get indoctrinated into crime without even having a choice. If you grow up in like some of these projects where the people are selling drugs and doing stuff, I mean, there's so many different factors. And for him to think that because at some point he may have struggled, he's not giving us context. So
Yeah.
I think if we go back and research this, you'll probably find that, yeah, maybe at some point he did struggle with some poverty. He had food stamps, but that in no way allows him to make a comparison and to pretend like everybody else should have turned out the way that he did.
Very true. No, and as you mentioned, those that, and I know you referenced it before, but also not losing mind or track of the policies that put people in those poor communities to your point that incarcerates them, that does not allow them to get a job, and all of those factors that lead to kind of creating that vicious cycle that poverty can be. In some ways, what differentiates the U.S. from many other countries is the fact that at least some few people can kind of escape that that cycle through work, through school, and there's more opportunities. There's actually a little bit more support here for poor people than it is in Latin America, for instance. There's more social nets, social what am I blanking out? Social benefits that help, food stamps, Section 8 housing, free lunches at school that actually do help people have a better life and work towards getting to a place where they can become a member of Congress from Florida.
Yeah, and also if he was sincere about understanding the plight of those in poverty, and he actually believed that anybody in poverty can rise up and become successful without having to resort to crime, then he would be more for funding programs that would allow people to follow that track. Counseling programs, guidance programs, specific programs to help develop an individual, to help them, give them that mental fortitude to say, hey, look, we know you guys have been living in crime or in poverty for decades. We know that you've been in jail multiple times. Maybe there's been domestic abuse or just some type of abusive relationship at home, like all the negative qualities that come with living in poverty, all of the stigma and the low self-esteem and even like the self-hate, all of those things. Okay, fine. If you think that somebody can go through all that and not turn to crime, then how about sponsoring some programs that actually try to help people overcome all those things? Because yeah, you could make the case that if you have a really good like therapy or a really good really good programs in place that provide people counseling, therapy, and then you can fortify their minds so that they build walls against all these things so that they don't affect them to the point where they turn to crime, then fund them, right? Mm-hmm. Help these people if you think that there is a way not to turn to crime. But of course, he's full of BS. He's just like the last line sums it up nicely. I cannot apologize for my passion or for loving God, my family, and my country. So again, he didn't apologize. He said he's still trying to justify it at the end. He's like, well, I love my country so much that I'm willing to stand in the face of this socialist. That's the other angle. They call her a socialist, right? That, no. Anyway, let's see what else. But again, yeah, what I was saying in the beginning, that she's young. She's got a long, long career. She may intimidate him. Or he may have tried to hit on her and she rejected him. He may have been trying to play the Trump card, which is act this way to get support from my constituents. We have to see the district that he represents. Maybe he thought that would go well with those that vote for him. Whatever it is, right? I mean, it's just...
Well, apparently not so well, because apparently one of the Christian nonprofits that he was on, I think they kicked him out of the board.
Yeah, good for her, by the way, for standing up to him like that.
Yes, I think her speech, but just I think she's, and also when you see the way that she addresses these issues as a member of Congress and how she tackles her work, I think she takes it seriously. She's very so she has this ability. To your point, I do think that she has a a bright future in politics, whether it's continuing to serve as sort of the one of the ways that one of the people who are kind of helping move the liberal wing of the Democratic Party in that direction. I think eventually running for office. I think she would. I think if she was a little older, she could have been a contender this time around. Maybe not, but I think that in the future, who knows what the future holds, and she may, even if she doesn't get to be president or vice president, I think she'll have a bright future in politics if she continues to the work the ways that she's been doing. So,
And by the way, I don't agree with all of her politics. Just
yeah,
putting it out there. If you're to me, Tulsi is my candidate, the one
your
that I'm most
girl.
closely aligned with. But yeah, but again, doesn't mean that it's not justified the way that Yoho Uno here tried to talk to her, and I'm glad that he's facing the consequences of it. Again, media exposing him and people speaking up and letting him know that this is not going to be accepted anymore. Okay.
Follow us, like us, tweet at us on the Brown Perspective. We hope you liked the conversation, and we'll look forward to keeping it going.
Nos vemos.